You are about to enter a great adventure.
This is Strutting from Gorilla.
Welcome, everybody, to the 20th episode of Strutting from Gorilla. Very special episode, as always. We are here with Vito, Mikey Cash, the leader of Men in Mango, four 30-year-old men who love to talk about wrestling. And today we have a very special third installment of a series of three. We have the Bret Hart versus Shawn Michaels saga. We're going to talk about that for the entirety of this episode. So if you're into that, keep listening. All right. We're going to start with the early years where they're shitty tag team wrestlers. We're going to go into their singles careers and all the way up into the screw job and then the reconciliation. So, Mikey Cash, you want to start?
Sure. Actually, I have a question before we start, gentlemen. Matthew, if the listeners do not want to listen to this, do we have an alternative for them?
We do not.
Okay, so fuck it. Let's go.
Great. Thanks, Bobby. This was good. Good PSA.
Are we supposed to have an alternative?
I don't know, but it sounded like you wanted to give them an alternative.
Oh. Well,
you know, we're going to cut this part out.
Listen, this brings up a great point, though. If they don't want to listen to the episode, they can always get snippets on our TikTok page, which is _gorilla at TikTok. Or what's the other one, Mango, on Twitter? What's our handle there?
On Twitter, it's _gorilla as well.
You damn right it is, Mango. You damn right.
Oh, we have over 1,500 followers as of this morning. You could be another one if you just hit the fucking follow button.
Just do it.
Do it. Hit it.
Influencers.
The button.
Well, that's all we got for today. It was good talking to you guys.
Yeah, this was great. All right. Tune in next time. Shawn versus Bret.
We're very excited to talk about this because most of us are, well, at the end, I guess we'll talk about maybe our preferences between the two of them. Do we like the male stripper in Shawn Michaels, or do we like the excellence of execution in Bret Hart? I think it's a pretty easy answer.
It's a great question.
Some inherent bias already. I don't know if our listeners can tell. But
let's talk about the tag team shit.
Yeah, let's get into it. So for our listeners, a lot of the information, basically almost all of it, is from the Greatest Rivalries DVD that came out. I think it was in 2010, 2011 when that came out, and it covered Shawn versus Bret. It's a sit-down interview with JR. It's a really great sort of breakdown of their entire careers, where they sort of intersected, and how their rivalry sort of began, and kind of where it goes. It's a really good watch, and I wish it was on the network, but if anyone's interested, you guys should definitely just search around online, and you can pick it up fairly cheap. So that's really where we're getting a lot of the information from. So starting out early years, it's interesting because both of these guys during the interview sort of talk about being looked down on because of their size. And even though they were looked down upon, they were still sort of finding themselves in a lot of the main events at that time. So both the Hart Foundation and the Rockers were often sort of headlining these house shows that you had, Hulk Hogan on, and Ultimate Warrior, and all the big guys at the time, Macho Man, all of them. So it was really interesting, considering WWF at that time, talking about the late 80s, was definitely the land of the giants. Bret had sort of been watching for the Rockers for a little bit. It looked like he had been kind of scouting them. And when he saw that they were getting signed on by the WWF, he was very interested. He wanted a fresh team to work with. He thought it would be good chemistry with him and Jim Neidhart. And, at the time, the respect was pretty high. Shawn and Marty were already coming in. This was their second time in the company, and were fired earlier because they had, I think it was they were barely there for a month or something the first time they were in WWF, because they had that whole issue where they're at the bar and Shawn breaks the glass bottle over his head and just gets kind of wild. And so they already had this rambunctious sort of like flag on them. You know, they were already like looked at as, hey, you don't want to mess with these guys. You don't really want to like associate. But Bret didn't seem to care all much about that. He just wanted to have a decent tag team to work with. So they ended up having a tag team title sort of rivalry at Saturday night's main event. But unfortunately, I think we've mentioned this on a previous podcast. I don't know if it was the Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart one, that the rope breaks. and during the interview, and I don't know, like I know you guys watched it too, but like you could see how angry both Bret and Shawn got when they were talking about that, because they were like, the fucking referee just did not understand what Bret was saying about like, hey, stop the match for a minute, get the thing hooked back up and we could pick this back up. And the ref was just like a deer in the headlights the whole time when they're like both screaming at him. Vito, do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. I didn't see it live. I actually didn't even know that was a thing, but it when I saw it on the DVD, it was pretty funny. And it just goes to show it's like they won the championship, but then actually never actually got counted as a championship win, which is really hilarious. But you know, I want to just point out one thing before we get moving on. We spent 2 episodes, one full on Shawn Michaels, one full on Bret Hart, right? And the one thing that, you know, we want to recommend, go back, listen to those 2 and then listen to this, because it'll give you a better idea of the careers and kind of our opinions on it. But what I find really interesting is the trajectory of how their careers started and you know, then how it blossomed into this rivalry, right? So you have Shawn Michaels, who comes from basically no background in wrestling, and then all of a sudden joins wrestling, and then he's kind of influenced by the different territories, right? And he has Marty Jannetty and this kind of like party lifestyle, right? And he's got this charisma about him. And then you get Bret Hart, who's trained by his father, and their big thing, right? If you look at Bret Hart and all the Hart family, is like respect and like industry knowledge and respecting your opponent and kind of going up the ladder. So you got these 2 different styles that just clashed with each other. But it clashed, but then also at the same time, it made both of them better. And we'll get into that as we go, but I just wanted to set that stage going forward. So then they you're right. They start with this tag team. And that's really where this all started. And it was 2 totally different styles, right, Mike? Like you got Marty and Shawn, and they're high flyers, innovative moves, and then you got Bret and Jim Neidhart, who are very technical. Well, at least Bret's technical. I don't know about Jim Neidhart, but
Jim was basically the powerhouse of that group. And with obviously with Shawn and Marty, they were high flying. They were kind of innovative for that time, especially. And then you have just Jim being like that friggin' just maniac in the ring. He was awesome. Bret talks about in the interview that he thinks Jim might have done it on purpose. Like he thought Jim might have, like, because the rope unhooked after Jim Neidhart hit the turnbuckle. And he was like, I don't know if he maybe did it on purpose or what. And they're both laughing about it. And I was like, why would he do that on purpose? But I don't know. He was kind of nuts. One thing I found interesting, and to your point, Vito, that the fact that their styles were so contrasting, and even their approaches to the business were so in stark contrast to one another, that it made for they had great chemistry in the ring, I think, because of that. And kind of a peek behind the curtain, in the interview, there's a quote from Michaels where he's talking about sort of the perspective of management at the time when it came to him and Marty, I guess, too, was, we'll put up with them in this area of life because they can produce in the ring. And I thought it was important to write that down, because I think that is something that continued to carry on, as we'll see as we keep covering the later stages of their career, that Michaels was very much kind of enabled because of how good he was in the ring. And I think that didn't help as this rivalry continued on.
I'd agree.
Before we jump to the next level, I want to just call out the simple fact that, you know, with the Hart Foundation, or specifically with Bret and Jim, or at the time where it was the Rockers, where it was Shawn and Marty, is he still Italian, Vito? Is he Gannetti or is he Giannetti?
It depends if it's pasta night, he's Ganetti, Ganetti, not Ganetti.
So I just want to talk about those two individuals, Janetti and Jim, for a moment, because that's all you really need to talk about them. I don't know really what they brought to wrestling as a collective, other than simply being warm bodies. I didn't find either one of them to be really any good, and I don't know how they sustained in the business, other than the fact that they were riding coattails. And I think that's where the separation and the solo careers for the two really took off, because those two, Shawn and Bret, knew how to produce in the ring.
Yeah, no, I would. That's a really great point, Bobby. Yeah. It is a really great point, and it just goes to show you how good the other two were. You typically see that, though. I mean, look at most tag teams. You don't really see both of the guys take off. It's very rare. And usually you ride on the coattails of one of the guys. And early in your career, think about it. Shawn Michaels was early in his career. He needed to take off. He couldn't just start solo, right? He had to ride, if you think about it, he had to ride the coattails of Marty Jannetty to get into the WWE, really, because Marty Jannetty's the one that chose Shawn Michaels. So That's true. Kind of all came full circle. And with Bret, I think it was more of Bret was never the biggest guy. So Vince McMahon at that point loved big guys. That's just what he did. And Neidhart was this like big bear guy. He had that look with the big goatee and that stupid laugh, and he's like, he does the prototypical promo. Like you just start yelling into the mic with his, like you just fucking shot yourself up. You just start yelling into the camera. Back then, that's all they did. Like just literally, that's all they did. So that's a really good point, Bobby. But yeah, you're right. It took off into a singles career right after that. And they kind of, both of them went sideways, and Neidhart never really did much, and Jannetty kind of just fell off the wayside. And it's a really good point.
But to Mike's point earlier, it was how it was done. Bret broke off in a respectful manner. Yeah. And then you have Shawn, who literally fucking super kicks him into glass. Fuck this guy. I'm doing my own thing. And then I'm coming out with sensational Sherry.
Just the portrayal of each of them is so vastly different.
Yeah, it's perfect for what they were going to do. But they get into this singles career, right? And you're right. The Jannetty thing with the barbershop starts Shawn Michaels' career into this like sexy bad boy prima donna, type role. And then you got Bret Hart, who's like, the hometown hero, kind of, I do things the right way, like a semi-pseudo Hulk Hogan with a little bit more style. You know what I mean? That's kind of the best way that I put it.
Yeah, no, I'm actually, Vito, I agree with you. I know that this is
you're not supposed to do that this episode.
I know I'm not supposed to agree with Vito on this podcast, but I really do.
Well, savor that moment, because I don't think it's going to last.
It's not going to last that long. We're only at 1992. We got 5 years left to cover. So with that transition, why don't we'll jump into a little bit of their early careers. So by 1992, both of them were singles competitors. Bret wins the Intercontinental Championship. And in the interview with JR, he talks about feeling like this was kind of a banner moment for him, in terms of just kind of being a carrier for the smaller guys, being able to carry the load. HBK actually, he asked Shawn in the interview, hey, did you think that too? I thought maybe you kind of saw something in it. And again, you can kind of see that they have differing views on the business right there, because HBK is like, yeah, it was great, but his bigger I guess banner moment was watching Bret win the championship, was the WWF championship, because that was really, a lot of guys won the Intercontinental Championship that were of smaller stature. And that was more so kind of a label of somebody being a workhorse in the business and being able to trust somebody to go out and have those classic matches in the middle of the card, and sometimes main event the house shows when the main event guys couldn't be there in the smaller towns. So I think that was very much kind of par for the course, even though I think it's still a good moment for Bret and obviously leads to his ascension. But yeah, winning the WWF championship, which he did later that year, ended up being a real banner moment for those smaller stature guys to be at the top of the card. And during this time, it's something that I think a lot of people we kind of know, but we never really, I never really watched this match, but apparently Portland, Maine, 1992, they have a ladder match together. And this is 2 years before the WrestleMania 10 Classic between Michaels and Razor Ramon. And I know this might be a hot take for people who are traditionalists and love that match at WrestleMania 10, but after watching this, I like it. I like this match better. This ladder match, I think, is all around a better match.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree. Oh, I'm sorry, Vito. This is one of my favorite matches out of the whole series, and I think it had more to do with the fact that it was experimental for the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was only one ladder. They were still trying to figure out, positioning, trying to figure out where they needed to be in the ring, but everything was executed flawlessly, and I think that just goes to show you the gravitas of what those two were going to continue to bring years down the road. From an experimental standpoint, they could just execute at the highest of levels. It was new. It was different. It was the beginning of the new generation. And it's one of the reasons why I love this era of WWF wrestling. The match, start to finish, was phenomenal. So for those of you who need to figure out a way to check it out, it's not on the network, which disappoints me.
Very disappointing.
But I paid $17 on Amazon for the 3 DVD set, so check it out. JR's interview for that whole disc is phenomenal, and then the matches thereafter are gold.
Yeah, I want to point out with this match. Let's put it this way, okay? In the WrestleMania match with, or no, it wasn't. It was WrestleMania 10, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the Razor Ramon.
Razor, yep.
Yeah, let's put it this way: if Shawn Michaels can have a great ladder match with Razor Ramon, I mean, they say it all the time. Basically, Shawn had a ladder match with a match with a ladder. You know what I'm trying to say?
Right.
Let's put it this way: you put in there, because Razor Ramon was not the best wrestler in the world at all, but you put in a guy who can wrestle in a ladder match, right? Like Bret Hart. Of course, it's going to be way better, and it's before that time. So yeah, I don't doubt that. But I want to point out the significance of this part of the journey for the Bret versus Shawn rivalry, right? At this point in their state, you're right. Everyone's Intercontinental champion at this point, and little guys don't matter at that point. But at this point, you still have all the big guys that are, the heavyweight champions, and there was a lot of pressure for HBK and Bret Hart to, if they're ever going to get to that level, this is the time where they had to showcase their talent and their ability to do that. So that's when the heat had to turn up with these two, right? Now they're fighting to try and get that top spot, the Hogan spot, but they're not big guys. So they have to have all of that pressure. They have to be good at what they're doing. They don't have the ability to do it with their looks, because Vince loves those big guys. So how are they going to do it? They have to do it in the ring. And this is where I think is a crucial part for them, because they both learned how to tell stories in the ring with their work. And I think that's what made them so great at this point. And I also think that's what made the pressure of having that top spot when they got there at WrestleMania the biggest, the rivalry even bigger than it was.
And what's interesting about what you're saying, Vito, is at this very time, it's kind of this moment of this window of peace between the two of them, and they're actually friends at this point. And they both acknowledge it in the interview that part of that very drive that you were talking about actually united them, because they both thought, like, these old guys, they called them the dinosaurs, they thought they were better than them. And so in a way, they were actually like kind of lifting each other up, like, yeah, let's just keep having these classics and show them like how good we really are and how much better we think we are than these guys that are currently being given the top spot.
Yep. Until it came time that who's going to get the top spot.
Right.
That's where they separated each other. And that's where the clash of not just their in-ring styles, but their out-of-ring styles really, really hit home. Because you had Shawn, who was, I'll do whatever it takes. I'm going to get to the top spot, and kind of leveraged himself within the company behind the scenes, and Bret was more of your traditional, hey, let's do it the right way, by the book, respect, blah 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 blah, and that's when it all just blew up. And we'll get into that. I know we're moving on. I'm moving on kind of fast, but I just wanted to make that point that this is a crucial part because it kind of sets the stage for everything.
Mm-hmm. No, you're right. And it's during, so like, I mean, I guess we're still in 1992 here, but October 92, Bret Hart wins the championship, wins the heavyweight title. Then the following month has his first title defense. And who is it against? HBK, Survivor Series 1992. And it's funny because I personally forgot that this match ever happened. I always think Michaels Bret Survivor Series 97, and you forget that 5 years before that they actually had, and it was a really good match.
I know.
Obviously, it's early in their careers, but still really good to see like this first like true singles match between the two, and it's not like kind of a stipulation type of match, but really good match between the two of them, and I think just kind of further plants the seeds, I think, in Vince's mind when he sees these guys in the ring together of like, oh, this might be something we can come back to down the road.
I agree. Mango, you didn't you say that one of these was one of your favorite matches? I think you actually mentioned the Survivor Series match, right?
I did. This period, late 92, early 93, was a really cool time, I thought, in the business. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels at Survivor Series. Bret Hart was getting the reins. They didn't totally give him the top spot. It was kind of a placeholder because of the whole steroid scandal, I believe, at that time. And Hogan would eventually make his way back into the main event and take over and stuff like that. But this was a crazy time. Bret had a couple of defenses against, Shawn Michaels and also Razor Ramon. Mm-hmm. And those guys were definitely, they were bubbling up. Like Bobby said, the new generation was coming. It wasn't quite at the top yet, but it was getting there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and you had WCW was starting to make a splash here, right? It wasn't fully in effect yet, but they were gaining momentum, right? They had a lot of money behind them. And I think that the locker room and Vince was feeling the pressure. So it was one of those things. Do we stick with what we've always done, or do we start to push other things? Then we had the steroid scandal, like you said. So there's a lot of factors that went into it. And I think more so than regular times, there was a lot of pressure on the wrestlers at this point. Mm-hmm. And even as things start to unwind and WCW starts coming up the ranks, that's when I think that heat even came on harder. So being the top dog in WWF, when you get that championship, like you had to draw numbers, and there was a lot of pressure, and there's some people that could handle it and there's some that can't. It's not an easy thing. And you have a pressure of the boys in the back, right? Telling you and saying, oh, this guy doesn't deserve it. This guy does. I mean, it's like anything. There's always going to be people who agree and disagree. So we get into the Survivor Series match, and then what happens, Mike?
Well, I mean, so then obviously Bret goes over there. WrestleMania 9 in 1993. We don't need to relive that debacle at the end of it, but Bret Hart loses the title to Yokozuna. Then Yokozuna loses it to Hulk Hogan, and so then we have Hogan's little farewell tour, and then that's kind of when I think, like you were mentioning, Mango, like the new generation really kind of comes in. Once Hogan leaves, I think that's kind of like a very symbolic time in WWF, and now we get to kind of fast forward to like 1994, right? This is when Michaels himself gets popped for steroids, although he continues to deny that this ever happened. But it's like, all right, so he gets suspended. He returns at WrestleMania 10. He has a fantastic match with a ladder at WrestleMania, and then he sort of kind of goes on to his singles career starts to take off, and we've documented that. Later on, we go back. Let's go to 95 now, right? Michaels and Bret didn't have much interaction during this time. Michaels gets in that bar fight. He has to leave again for a few months, has to relinquish the Intercontinental Championship. But now this provides a moment for him to get propelled into the main event picture, because then he comes back, he returns at the Royal Rumble, he wins, and now the stage is set for WrestleMania 12, 1996, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Iron Man match for the WWF title. And this is where, like you were mentioning, Vito, this is the beginning of that who's going to get there at the top. Now both of them are kind of on the same level. From 1992 to 96, you could argue Bret was like a little bit of a step ahead.
Yeah, he definitely was.
Makes sense.
Yeah, no, he definitely was a step ahead at this point because he was the champion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think he had that professionalism about him. He didn't get popped for steroids, and I think he really enjoyed having the top spot. But again, this was a lot of pressure, right? Because now Hogan has gone to WCW, and what do? Now he has to take the place of kind of the Babe Ruth of wrestling. That's a tough thing to do. Yeah. And he's a small guy. So he had to not only prove that he was better than Hogan, but he had to prove to Vince that we could do this as small guys. You know what I mean? As smaller guys. They're not small guys, but they're smaller guys in the industry standards. And it definitely this match. So I think this match was a great way to kind of showcase that. It's a 60-minute Iron Man match that nobody thought people would want to tune in and watch, and it turned out to be one of the greatest matches of all time. And it really goes to show you. Now, behind the scenes too, though, there was a lot going on here. Okay, you have Shawn Michaels, who's positioned himself with the Clique, right? And basically, this Clique is able to kind of they have a lot of pull with Vince McMahon. And Bret, he had the respect of Vince, but he always kind of was the company guy. Like, you tell me to do this, I'm going to do it. So this match happens, and it's an absolute classic, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about it a little bit in the past episode, so I'm not going to go into it too much. But right at the end, there was definitely, to me, this was the beginning of the kind of real life backstage drama that led into this feeling like a real rivalry. Because when Michaels won, okay, Bret being the guy that he is and having that kind of respect factor, every time you lose, you hand the title off to someone else, you do the job for them. It's really kind of known that you thank them afterwards, right? Thank you for doing this. Well, Michaels, of course, kind of the asshole that he is. He gets you remember the iconic moment. He wins, gets on his knees, and kind of puts his arms up in the air.
Yeah.
Right before that, he looks at the referee and says, "Give me my title and tell Bret to get the fuck out of the ring." And so that right there is just the exact thing that set him off. And I think that's when we led into everything else.
Well, Vito, what do you think about the interview where both of them say that this was a work? That they wanted to plant the seeds for a return match, and that was the way to do it, was Bret feeling disrespected as the champion. And that it was the locker room that created more of the rivalry at this point than they did in reality.
And I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. But when you have that pressure put on you to be the top, and all of a sudden you get there, you don't want to lose that again, right?
That's true.
So Michaels said he would do one thing, and then he said, well, wait a minute. I kind of like being here. There's a lot of pressure, but I like being here. And then, you don't just, first of all, that story was not something that, like, truthfully, you would put in a storyline. It just happened. You know what I mean? It just actually happened. So I think there was a real line there that was drawn, and it was like, what's real versus what isn't real. Mm-hmm. And it just kind of set people off. And when Michael said, yeah, you know what, we're going to set up a return match, but then he sets up the return match, it doesn't kind of follow through with all of it the way that it was supposed to happen, like Bret wanted.
Yeah,
it pissed Bret off.
Get to that.
It pissed Bret off.
Yeah.
So again,
I mean, really what pissed him off, I think, was what happened beforehand. This was, the resentments began after, Bret and HBK have this conversation where he sort of just starts talking about how he plans to work only with, like, the Clique members once he wins the title. And this was before he found out that they were leaving for WCW. But he was like, hey, once I win, I'll just start, like, I'm just going to, like, work with these guys. And I know that's where Bret started to take some issue. Was like, well, like, if you win, you could work with anybody. Why do you have to only work why are you only limiting it to just your buddies that you want to have?
Because they're manipulators. They're like lobbyists, right? They're gonna do what they do until they get what they need.
Yeah.
And here's the thing, though, and I'll get, and then Mango, you can say whatever you need to say here, but I just want to point this out, right? I don't blame HBK. Let's put it that way. Yes, I am a Bret Hart fan, but at this point, I don't blame HBK. You're going to do what you need to do. You get to the top and you stay there and you find a way to stay there. That's what makes this great. It's capitalism at its finest here, folks, right? Like, you get to the top. Yeah, you're going to have ethic values that maybe people don't agree with, but Shawn Michaels brought the sizzle, baby. He brought the sizzle. He put fans in the seats. He put on the best matches. I think he was a better worker than Bret Hart when it comes to selling for your opponents. So yeah, I would think at this point, it definitely, this is when things started to get real hot. If you're on a sizzle scale, this is when things were starting to boil to the top.
I can't disagree with that, Vito. And you kind of took the words out of my mouth. What I was going to say is, okay, so Shawn Michaels, right? He's an asshole. Decides to only work with the people that he wants to work with. He's finally reached the top of the mountain, right? But what does he have that's really kind of driving him further? It's insecurity. He's not secure in the top spot. Correct. He's like, I gotta do all this other shit to keep my top spot. But I kind of blame, like you said, I don't blame Bret or Shawn for what happened up until this point. Like, why they're at each other's throats is because Vince kind of threw them in the ring and said, fight it out like pit bulls. You know what I mean? But think about this. Before Shawn got his run at the top after WrestleMania 12, who was getting runs at the top? Big Daddy Cool Diesel had a 1-year title reign. Vince is just handing things to these big dudes, like you had said. Yeah. Like, he makes these other guys work above and beyond. Like, how long was Shawn Michaels the best wrestler on the roster before he became champion? It had to be
from 94 to 96.
Yeah, easily.
Yeah,
exactly. What kind of point? That's a great point. He's the best for 2 years before he gets the crown. And then what does he have to do? He's like, oh, I finally got it. I got to fucking stay here.
Yeah, exactly. No, 100% right.
Right. It's funny because you can tell that insecurity also comes down to, and this gets talked about later on in the interview. So that's the only reason I'm bringing it up, but that he wanted Bret's validation. A lot of it comes down to this desire to get that respect from Bret. And I think Michaels, talking about how differently they approach the business, I think that's where these kind of like mixed signals started happening. Like, their signals got crossed is the best way to put it. And the way Michaels was going about trying to get that respect from Bret ended up actually achieving the opposite, because then it wouldn't work out exactly how we planned. Bret himself also had his own issues in terms of his expectations for Shawn. So then both of these things aren't happening. And now Michael starts getting resentful. Bret starts getting resentful. And like they said, they worked themselves into a shoot. It ended up, it's funny because it goes from like competition to sort of this disdain for one another. And I think you saw that progress, at like later on in 96, once Bret starts even coming back, you can see that start happening even further. Like the jabs start happening in these little promos that he's pulling. And I know that they were leading to him in Austin at the time, but he was still leaving that door open, because I think in their mind, they had still planned on having that rematch at WrestleMania 13. And so should we get into 97?
Actually, before we jump into it, Mike, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because I think this goes back to that miscommunication on both wrestlers' behalves. But in order to get respect, one must give respect. At what point did Shawn ever give Bret a fucking ounce of respect? Zero. He respected him as a wrestler, but there was no. It wasn't showcased. It wasn't mutual. I mean, it was, but then it wasn't, and that's where this miscommunication always re-stems.
And let me again reference the quote earlier on in the documentary. We'll put up with them in this area of life because they can produce in the ring. This keeps coming up. And that's exactly what I think continued to fuel Michaels not making any changes to the way he was approaching it.
Yeah.
Because
I
it
also,
was at this time, wasn't Bret getting ready to go off to the sunset with the
Not-
Lonesome Dove? That
he
was the
was
show that
thinking
he
that he
was
thought the
supposed
show
to
was
be
going
go
to
on
take
to.
off. Yeah, he thought it was
Yeah.
going
I
to take off.
remember that WWF magazine cover,
You're
and I
right.
go, "What the fuck is this? I have no idea what's going on."
It's
You
the
got
worst
this-
cover of
But-
all time.
You
but-
got
but,
this
Bobby-
Calgary cowboy.
Bobby, that's a great point, right? So Shawn Michaels gets the title, right? And Bret Hart's like, you know what? I'm going to go off and I'm going to try acting. I'm going to try doing other things with my career. And it doesn't work out, right? It doesn't work out. And he comes back. And he knew, kind of had a feeling he was coming back anyways, because they were planning this whole thing, right? But Shawn Michaels is there. He's got the title. And what is he going to do? Say, oh, yeah, Bret's coming back now. I have to drop the title to Bret. Like, come on. I don't blame Shawn here. Like, you're at the top spot. You fought your ass off. This guy goes off to do TV shows and then wants to come back. It's the same thing as Hogan. Hogan did the same thing. So you can't tell me that Bret Hart can sit here and say, oh, I'm this respectful guy. And then when Shawn doesn't want to drop the title, I get Bret did it for Hogan, but I guarantee you Bret was just as pissed off. So my thing is like, yeah, I don't blame Shawn. Do I think he handled it right by all of a sudden? I know we're going to get into this because this brings up the next point. I just my knee hurts. I have to drop the title. I get it. The way he handled it was not good, but that's Shawn Michaels. That's what made him great. He always gave you the subliminal like fuck you without actually going and saying fuck you, you know?
Was it actually subliminal when he told you
It was
with an
not
X
subliminal.
to suck his dick? I don't really think that was all that subliminal.
I guess, but on TV it was.
Yeah.
He never on TV straight out like showed the disrespect for Bret. He blamed it on his knee injury. I lost my smile, you know, like this whole thing. So, but plus you had the pressure, like you're sitting there taking all this pressure as the top dog in a spot where you're this small guy and no one's ever had the title like this at this point like this. You feel the pressure from WCW with Hogan now, and Bret leaves to do acting and whatever, and then wants to come back and was he supposed to drop the title to him? I don't blame Shawn for being pissed off. Like I really don't. I don't think he handled it well, but at the end of the day, like I don't blame him. He just handled it differently than Bret handled it with Hogan. But
I think this goes back to that backstage bullshit with the click.
100%.
So when you're getting ready to hear that, you know, I'm gonna basically give every one of my boys that match
100%.
Because at that point, and if you remember in one of our previous episodes, we were talking about this with Owen. Bret used to fight Owen because the purse that was associated with fighting a champion, right?
Yep.
So
100%.
now all of a sudden the money's circling around just in that click, and that's enough to make a whole locker room toxic because you got four guys trying to run the whole show.
Absolutely. But at the same point, like he took action when Bret didn't take action. Like when Bret was in a similar situation with Hogan, Bret just said, you know what? Yeah, I got to drop the title. I'm doing what Vince says to do. Whereas Shawn said, fuck that. I'm going to take action. We're going to have this clique of four people. I can't do it on my own, but if I get in there with four people and I can control it, why not? I get to control the money. I control creative. I can do all of that. And why wouldn't you? If that's your defense mechanism to be able to do it, I'm not saying it's right. Don't get me wrong. I'm just saying from his perspective, it makes a lot more sense. And I think there was a part of him, you know, Bret will always tell you, like, it's all about respect. Like, you do this a certain way. And I agree. But Bret got fucked when he did that. Think about it. With the Hogan situation.
Well, of course he did.
He got fucked. So, like, I think that even added more to the fire that he's like, Shawn found a way to kind of do this. And I didn't. And I did it the right way. And this guy's being an asshole. But I don't blame Shawn. I don't blame Shawn when it's about money.
Yeah, Shawn did see some results, but Bret got fucked again with Shawn with the whole lost my smile thing. So, I mean,
he did.
The way Michaels just approached business and what you just said about how much like that was just Shawn Michaels. Well, guess what? Like that fucked over Bret too. What did Bret do? Bret didn't do anything. So so Michaels caused a lot of this too. Like,
I don't disagree.
Especially in '97 when he pulls that bullshit, right?
So, why don't you explain it? Because I know we're.
So yeah, I know we're kind of getting ahead of ourselves.
We are, but I have one quick teaser.
Okay.
And that goes into we were talking about, you know, the wrestlers who were getting screwed throughout this whole time. But one of the casualties of this whole warfare was Yokozuna.
Sure.
Yokozuna totally got hosed. He was the first Samoan who, at the time, nobody knew was Samoan, to lose his title within fucking, 90 seconds of owning it, or something absolutely ridiculous. Yeah. But I digress, because we're gonna have a whole episode of heavyweights.
Yeah, Bobby always finds a way to bring a big guy in here, even when we're not even talking about him. So I think this next episode that we have about big guys, it's just going to be like 90% Bobby Stone, because
we're just going to let him go.
Yeah, but no, go ahead, Mike. Let's explain what happened.
In 1997, you start seeing WWF is kind of behind in the ratings. At this point, the NWO was well established in WCW. So one of the things that Vince McMahon is becoming open to at this moment is pushing the envelope, the attitude era, if you will. It's kind of where you start seeing the seeds truly planted for it. And part of that is blurring the lines of what was real, what was meant as a storyline. You know, it was all of this to kind of get a grab, people to question, oh, is that real or not? And then you buy tickets because you're going to go see the show now. And part of that kind of came out in the promos that people were cutting on one another. They were getting a bit more visceral. They were getting a bit more personal and hitting way close to home. And when you already have this concept to start pushing the envelope, blurring the lines between reality and work, and then you're mixing that in with the promos, it makes it really difficult to parse out what is what. And kind of leads further into Bret and Shawn particularly working themselves into a shoot. You think about some of this whole like retirement thing when HBK says he lost his smile, right? And Bret doesn't buy it. He thinks this was kind of a big factor in them sort of kind of heating up the resentment between the two of them. In the interview, they both try to like hash this out again. And again, Michael's kind of like, he doesn't have a great defense for it. I think in his mind, he's like, oh no, I've always had kind of knee issues and there's always some pain there. But one of the things that pisses Bret off is so he walks away, the title match is off. We all know kind of how WrestleMania 13 pans out, and Bret ends up having an all-timer with Stone Cold, and I think we all agree that it's a fantastic match. But Michael shows up at WrestleMania despite losing his smile, so one knock. Within like the next month or so, he's kind of coming out and he's doing fucking backflips off the turnbuckle while claiming that his knee is injured. And then it's like, Bret's like, what the fuck is going on? Like, you're saying that your knees hurt. So like, which one is it? And Michael says, well, it's part of my insecurity that I was angry. I was miserable. And, I had this chip on my shoulder. So he goes out and he's like, being an asshole. He's kind of basically hurting himself to try to prove a point is what he was saying. And Bret still kind of doesn't buy it.
Of course he doesn't. And again, it goes back. It's Shawn Michaels saying, fuck you. If you're going to take the title again, I'm not going to help make you money. And he knows he can make him money because their matches are the best. And he's not going to do it. So he thinks he's going to go in there. This is my opinion. Shawn Michaels won't come out and say this, but he's going to go in there and think Bret has to work with whoever, and they're going to have a shitty match. And Shawn Michaels is going to go and steal the show again and prove the point that I'm the better than Bret and I don't need Bret and I should have the title, and he's not going to make money with me because I should have the title. And that's Shawn Michaels. That's how he is. That's how he was. He was at this point not in a great state of mind. Things were starting to heat up there where he's doing drugs and drinking a lot of alcohol. So like, I get it. I get all of that. It was just a perfect storm. But again, at this point too, you got to remember, like, so this whole thing goes down and they're fighting backstage and you don't know what's real, what's not real. Well, at this point, what's happening? WCW slowly gaining momentum. So the pressure's mounting even more in WWF, right? So at that point, Vince McMahon, who had loved Bret like a son, actually gave him a 20-year contract, right? And basically gave him his word at that point and basically came to him and said, hey, look, we're running out of funding here. I don't have the money to pay you on this. I think, because there was a point right before Bret came back when he was doing those TVs before, after Shawn Michaels won at WrestleMania 12, where WCW offered him a contract. and it was a lot of money. And Bret said no. He told Vince, and Vince kind of countered and gave him this 20-year contract. So all of this happened. There was a lot of fighting going back and forth, and the money wasn't really there to some degree. And I don't know that Bret loved the way that the reality, although he was like a big part of it, and he did really well with it. Like he didn't love the reality aspect of it all, and kind of the raunchy nature. So kind of all those things combined, like Vince basically said, hey, I think you should go. I can't honor this contract. You should go back to see if WCW can give you that money. And so Bret does, and they say yes. And so it was kind of like one of those things. This is where it set up everything. And Vince was still pushing Bret. Bret was champion at the time. So this is where it sets up the whole Montreal screw job. Yeah. And so... Go ahead.
I just want to say, even before that, again, like Michaels continues to get enabled throughout this whole thing, and I find that to be the most interesting part of this. Really, more so than even what Michaels is doing. It's the fact that management, which doesn't get really brought up a lot in this whole rivalry. We think it's either Shawn or Bret, but like Vince McMahon is the one running the fucking show over there.
Yeah.
Like that's never been in doubt. So let's not forget that he enabled a lot of this bullshit from him.
Of course he did.
And it comes back to that fucking quote from the beginning.
It does.
Because he was good, they just kept letting him put up with this bullshit. And so maybe they had reservations too about whether that knee injury was legit or whether his smile was actually lost, but they just let him go. They just let him do whatever he wants. And so I can totally understand from Bret's perspective, like why that would piss me off.
Of course.
Like, are you fucking kidding me? Like this guy is just doing whatever he wants and you just keep letting him do it. And throughout the whole interview, throughout the Shawn Michaels documentary, Vince says it. He says, he's talked to me like a lot of superstars would never get away with.
Right.
Already, was whether or not you think Vince treated Bret like a son, that was his kid.
Right. And I agree with you
that
because
got shown, and that was a big factor in all of this.
Yeah, there was a quote in the JR podcast, Grilling with JR, and they do a really great episode on Shawn Michaels. And JR does a great job explaining this, but JR says that Vince looks at Shawn as like his son, and he sees a lot of himself in Shawn Michaels. So when you see that, and you have a guy like Vince, who's basically bred from the same cloth as Shawn Michaels, just he may not have the athletic ability, but the mindset's still the same, right? Like he'll do whatever it takes to get to the top. He doesn't care. And Vince loves those types of guys. He loves those guys. Like that's how he is. And so Shawn would tell him straight to his face, yell at him, but he also knew the passion and how good of a worker Shawn was. So I think Shawn had a big edge over a lot of other people in that aspect. And so, but it leads up to this screw job, right? Right. So we know we going into Survivor Series, Bret's the champion. And there's been instances before, because there's a lot of pressure from WCW, where Vince can't let Bret leave with the title because it does terrible things for the company and the worth of that title. And while I believe that Bret would have done the right thing, Bret did not want to lose to Shawn Michaels because of the at this point, the hatred is so high. They really hate each other. They had a segment on Raw where they talked about sunny days, and it was a whole segment about how Bret was cheating on his wife with Sunny, and he brought it up on TV because Shawn Michaels didn't give a fuck. He wanted to piss Bret off as much as he could. They hated each other. Yeah. And so this whole thing led to this thing where Bret was like, you know what? I've done everything I can for Shawn Michaels. We've had this big rivalry, but I don't want to lose to him. My contract is set to expire the day after Survivor Series. You know what, Vince? Let me win against Shawn in Montreal, my hometown, which is a big thing for Bret. He loves the respect. And then I'll drop the title the next night on Raw. You have my word, or I'll forfeit it or drop it, however you want me to do. I just don't want to lose it to Shawn Michaels. And Vince was kind of in a weird position because he knew Bret held the power. His contract expired. He was champion. I don't know how he let it get to this point, to be honest with you. I really don't. But then, so they go in there and, it goes back and forth. And, I mean, I don't know. What are your thoughts on this point going in there?
Well, what's quite like serendipitous about this whole thing is that the documentary Wrestling with Shadows was actually filming from 1996 through the screw job, which was kind of wild that this was happening. And Bret actually wears a mic going into that final meeting with Vince. And let's for a quick second just look at some of the context of a couple other things that were happening up until Survivor Series. You know, the mistrust continues to grow between the two of them. Michaels makes that statement about not wanting to put anybody over, which just further pisses off Bret. They end up actually getting in a fight. I think they said it was like in Hartford, Connecticut. They end up getting in some fight backstage where they're like all over each other. They have multiple sit downs with Vince and other people in management to try to like get things squared away. Nothing works. They are just at each other's throats at this point, and they've kind of they've worked themselves into this where they've created this whole situation where neither one of them really likes the other one. And so that creates the mistrust. And whenever one of them makes a shitty decision, the other one's jumping all over it. And so now we get to Survivor Series. We're in Montreal. Bret is meeting with Vince that night. And we can hear, if you watch Wrestling with Shadows, you hear the whole audio where they agree to a plan. They come up with the plan to have like basically a double DQ. It's a whole schmoz at the end where the Hart Foundation and DX come out. And then the next night on Raw, he was going to come out and just relinquish the title. And so Vince agrees to do it. And then, cut back to the interview with Shawn and Bret. And, they talk about how Shawn, Vince, and Triple H were in a room together afterwards. And the idea comes up to just kind of take the title off of Bret because in their minds, he doesn't want to do business, which I do understand, which is true. Right. And what's funny is that year started with Michaels doing the exact same thing.
I think it's a little bit different here, though. The difference is you got a guy going to WCW, your biggest competitor, who's winning in ratings right now, by the way. Right. And you have a chance of the empire that you started, which basically took out every wrestling territory in the nation, right, is now possibly coming to an end. They were in a bad financial shape at this point, very bad. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of pressure under Vince. Do I, do right by a guy who I love, or do I risk the future of everybody else in this locker room, or do I have to do what's necessary to keep my business alive? And so at that point, the hatred between Shawn and Bret was so high that Vince had to go. And at this point, like, listen, I can honestly tell you, and I don't know Vince McMahon by any means, but I can tell you based on everything we've heard and listened to, Vince had a ton of respect for Bret. He was Bret's, and so for him to be able to come out and do what he did at Survivor Series shows you how much that hatred was still there between Bret and Shawn. And the problem here is you have a guy who's trying to save his business and another guy who has done everything and put his heart and soul into helping this guy grow his business now have to leave. So I'm on this one. As much as I love Bret Hart, I am on team Vince McMahon on this as much as possible. And again, Shawn will tell you in all of his documentaries that he doesn't necessarily say that he was behind it and doesn't necessarily agree with it. But I think he had to do what was necessary because it was going to kill his career too.
Well, it's funny though, because WWF also had no problem being on the receiving end of somebody leaving another organization with their championship and coming over.
Of course they didn't, though.
Remember when Ric Flair showed up?
Yeah, of course.
He was wearing the fucking WCW championship.
But that's why.
But here's what I'm saying though. Like, so they had no problem being the organization that took it. Like,
oh right, of course they didn't. But that's why I think he would. But I think that's why he was even more adamant about not allowing it to happen because he saw what he did. Of course, and I don't disagree.
But I think that doesn't put that is talking about how much Vince loved Bret. Like, why did he not trust him enough? What made you think in anything that Bret had done throughout his whole career that he would actually disrespect the business like that? When in actuality, the guy that you were about to put the title on had actually shown more examples of that than Bret did.
That's a good point.
My opinion.
It's a good point, Mike. But if I'm the owner of business that's at this point losing money, I'm doing everything I can to survive. and I don't want to lose. And Vince is a very competitive guy. Obviously, you know that. And he hated Ted Turner at that time.
Yeah.
Hated him.
Yeah.
Hated him. So why would he even take the chance of someone doing that?
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, two things. Number one, I don't think he didn't trust Bret. I think he didn't trust Eric Bischoff.
I could see that.
Number one. Number two, I think Vito says he's team Vince McMahon in this whole thing. I think he's the ultimate cause of the whole thing. Mike and Bobby, what do you think of this take? It's kind of a lukewarm, kind of shitty take, but I'm going to tell you anyways.
It's not, and I am normally team Vince 100%.
Yeah, Bobby, we know he's on your Mount Rushmore. Okay,
hold on.
So
let me give you the take first. Hold on, I'll let you finish, Bob. Right after. This is it. This is my take, Bob. Vince was to blame because he didn't take a hard enough stance with Bret Hart. You're the boss. Tell Bret Hart what's going to happen, and that's what's going to happen. Number one. Number two, you can't pull this bullshit behind his back in the ring in front of everybody.
No, it's extremely embarrassing.
So what we've been talking about this whole time through has been respect in the ring, respect, and that's exactly what Shawn never showcased. Vince was supposed to showcase respect, and here is in Calgary, this man wanted to do it in his home. You're talking about a business who is pissing out money, losing it left and right, so they go up to where they don't go to anymore in Canada because now they get booed out of the fucking country. They were going up there, and you embarrassed Canada's finest. You could have did it in Ottawa, not in his hometown. He wanted to drop the belt anywhere else. He still had almost 60 days of that contract before he was going to go to WCW. You're telling me you couldn't have dropped the belt anywhere else? No, you wanted to screw him. You pissed him off. You disrespected him. And quite frankly, it was utter shit all the way around. And the fact that they all went in after they had that conversation and Shawn was like, I'll do whatever you want to do, pal. Fuck you.
Well, hot take, Bobby Stone. Hot fucking take.
Yeah. No, Bobby, that's a great point. I'll tell you that the thing I didn't agree with is, here's the thing, right? So you have the screw job and this whole thing goes down. It's like a big controversy, probably the biggest controversy. Listen, it's not the first time this has ever happened, by the way, right? No. This isn't the first time this has ever happened.
Wendy Richter.
Right. So, but let's think about this for a second, right? So this all happens. Bret has a clause in his contract. He couldn't be on TV for a certain amount of time with WCW. Okay, so they do the deed, whatever, everything happens, and it was this big controversy. And, that is the last time, unfortunately, the fans ever get to see Shawn Michaels with Bret Hart, okay? But that made this rivalry so much better. Like, it's like, it almost forced WWF to, not overplay something, right? Because the rivalry was done. And I think that gives this so much even more mystique, this whole rivalry. Sure. But the things that make me even laugh harder is if Vince McMahon, so listen, I'm team Vince McMahon on this one. I love Bret, but I think he had to do it this way. But then he goes on, if he has the respect for Bret that he says he does, why does he continue? If you watch the Raws afterwards, it's like they don't stop mentioning this screw job for months. Nope. And they go on, and then Shawn Michaels does the whole interview. He's like, Bret's coming out, and they got the midget wrestler that comes out as Bret Hart, and they just make fun of him.
They night on Raw.
They bash his family. They never treated him with that type of respect. So it's like this really, it's almost like they knew Bret would always kind of be the better man. So they took advantage of it. But I will tell you this right now, without that whole thing, the best thing that came from this rivalry and that screw job is Vince McMahon became the biggest heel WWF ever had. And it was a natural progression, which then set up Stone Cold and the best run you'll ever see, which then skyrocketed WWF over WCW.
That's just a pretty large personal toll.
Of course it is.
You know what I mean? You hear all that and yeah, that's great business wise, but as a fucking human being, that's really shitty.
100%.
You kind of left
Like,
everything in tatters.
It's really no wonder that people like take Bret's side on it, though. Like, look at everything that happened afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
It's awful.
Well, Bret's very well respected. Listen, I love listening to him talk because he talks about wrestlers, and I love every second of Bret Hart. Don't get me wrong, but this whole thing is just it is one of the. It's like one of the best and worst things to happen in wrestling, right? Yeah. Like I loved it, but I hated it because it from a personal standpoint. But okay, so I know we're
keep moving.
We got to keep moving here.
In November 1997 for years. But
hold on, guys, we've pretty much done 92 to 97, right, Mikey Cash?
Yep.
Yeah.
Or actually earlier than that to 97. We're getting very low on time here. We're about an hour in.
True. Yeah.
Why don't we do this? Let me see what you guys think of this. Let's cut it now, right? We can maybe do the aftermath of some shit next week or something. But what do you think? Final thoughts on who is your guy, Bret or Shawn?
Well, I think let's just quickly talk about the ending real quick on how this happened, because I think we can wrap it up pretty quickly. We've gone to the bare bones of everything, Mango. I'd rather keep everything on one podcast, even if we're over a little bit of time here.
What else do we have to cover?
Just basically, so this goes on for years, Mango, right? And so there's this mystique where Bret versus Shawn, and like Shawn goes into Montreal, and he's got this toll of being the guy that screwed Bret, and it's this heavy weight on both of them, right? It's this heavy weight, and so years go on. WCW goes out of business. Bret's run there is terrible, and I'll tell you, the rivalry between the two of them, Bret's career was never the same afterwards, and it sucks mostly because of injuries. But it's like this whole thing just was terrible, but it's talked about. And I think the biggest draw is to see them kind of just reconcile everything. Mm-hmm. So years go on, Bret's older, Bret has a stroke, and he's injured a lot.
Can we pause on that for a second though?
Yeah.
I know we're tight on time, but if we're going to talk about a stroke, that stroke was caused by stress that came on because of the screw job. You're talking about years of just stress, disdain, and to the point where your body couldn't take it anymore. Vince screwed him so fucking bad that the man had a stroke, and it wasn't just because of the business. It wasn't just because of the work. And that's probably why it kind of sickens me the way everything went down. You could have did it in fucking Ottawa, but you gave the man a stroke instead.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bobby.
Yeah. So one other piece that's interesting here, and look at the timing of when this all happened. It's really weird because we talk about like the contrast of Bret and Shawn. Bret has his stroke in 2002. 2002 is also the year that Michaels comes back to wrestling and begins the second blossoming career that he has, right? Where he's this new person. It's just, I don't know if there's any significance behind it, but I just thought I would mention that it's very odd that was the time it happened. And it's just kind of leads more to, like you said, the mystique of this wild rivalry between the two of these guys.
Well, yeah, and I mean Bret's brother passed away too in the ring. There's just a whole slew of things. But moving on, like I know we're short on time. I want to get this all in one episode. I think it'd be better to cover it all in one. We talk about Bret and Shawn all the time. And I want to kind of wrap this up so we can move on to bigger and better things. But so they reconcile. Bret's wanted to kind of bury the hatchet for multiple years and wanted to come back and never could. So 2010 comes. And, you see Bret go in the Hall of Fame. You see him do all these different things. He comes out with the DVD. So you can see him mending his relationship with Vince and wants to come back and kind of cement his legacy in WWE. It's kind of past his prime to wrestle. He's not going to put on very many matches. But the big thing is kind of doing this whole thing with Shawn. I posted the video on our TikTok, a snippet of it when he comes back at Raw. But I watched it again today, and it just it gave me... It just was great. It was great. And apparently they had not talked to each other since the screw job until they were in the ring. And it was good. It was good. You could see in Bret's eyes, like he still hated him, but he was willing to do this. And Shawn kind of felt the same way. And it was good. They did the DVD. It was a great way to kind of take the stress off Bret, take the stress off Shawn, get a superstar that deserves his legacy cemented in WWE back in there. And they've been on good terms since then. And now we get to relive Bret Hart's run in WWF. And could it have been different? Yeah, that's the question. We'll always see this. But Mango, to answer your question, okay, now that we've kind of wrapped things up, Team Shawn, Team Bret. Okay. I'm both. Okay. I am probably more Team Shawn in the performance aspect of wrestling, but I also am more Team Bret in the kind of the respect factor. I cherish people who do things the right way, but Shawn just was such a good wrestler. There's a reason that he stayed in the WWE for so long. And you can go back and listen to our HBK podcast and it talks all about his second run. But like, there's a reason people put up with how much of a shitbag he was for that few years in 96, 97, because he was so good. Like, he was just so good. I mean, there was an interview the other day where Undertaker came out and basically said, you know, we weren't friends. I hated Shawn, but they had a chemistry in the ring that was so good, it was undeniable. Like, they never rode together. They never did anything. So there's a reason people would put up with him, because he drew money and he knew how to do it. And so that's the big thing.
Well, I am Team Bret all the way. I think the whole of what Vito said, it in wrestling, I think it sends the wrong message. So you can be absolutely shitty, but if you're good, you can just keep getting away with it. And I think that's what I take away from it. And I get people probably not going to agree with me that are listening to this, but like, there's got to be some fucking consequence to the things you do. And, you know, Michaels probably, it seems like he had that outside of the ring. He had a lot of stuff that happened to him outside, but, you know, I feel like Bret, even though he definitely has his role in this whole thing. I'm not saying that he's absolutely innocent, but I'm Team Bret.
One thing I'll say, just to kind of wrap it up too, is that we don't always get the chance when something like this happens to see a result that happened like Shawn Michaels did. Okay. A lot of times when people go down that path of drugs and alcohol and they're in that bad of a position, we don't get to see them come back and do a redemption story.
No, we're reading
and
the
Shawn
obituary.
Right. So the fact that we were able to see a great rivalry, stuff went wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then you get a redemption from Shawn Michaels to come back and have that second part of his career. And then Bret actually allows him to apologize and we can kind of wrap everything up. It's a once in a lifetime type of thing.
No,
like, and it actually is very good to see all of that. So I'm happy we got that. So.
Yeah. No. And listen, I'm glad that they reconciled too. I do think it's a powerful moment. It gave me chills, and when they talk about it, you can see how much it meant to the both of them to finally be able to put all of this shit behind them and to just move forward. So with that, yeah, absolutely.
So I think you guys have figured out which team I was on pretty quickly, but I lean Bret, but I love them both. Shawn, I think, was just fantastic in the ring. I think as a part of the new generation, as a collective, they were both catalysts and brought the WWF to a point where we could start to respect and enjoy the smaller wrestlers as well, because it wasn't supposed to all be the end all be all. The big wrestlers, they brought nothing but fantastic chemistry, and they were technicians in the ring. They were crafty as all hell, and you could just see them do things that were revolutionary in the business. So to that, I say, love them both. Fuck Vince. Thank you, Bret.
We're gonna have to quote that. He said it's not all about the big wrestlers. You guys all heard that, right?
Although true, I still love me some Yokozuna.
All right, great job, guys. I guess we'll wrap it up here.
Well, who do you have, Mango? Before you wrap it up, who do you have? Yeah. You didn't really say. I think I know where you're leaning, but give us your take too.
You know, coming into this, I was a little bit on the fence because growing up, I was always a Bret guy, but you can't deny Shawn's ability, all that other shit. And after hearing everything today, I'm back on Team Bret. I was thinking about the only time I think I ever rooted for Shawn in my life was WrestleMania 11 when he was facing Diesel, because I fucking hated Diesel. And but Bret's always been my guy, other than Hogan. He was the next guy growing up. I loved his fucking theme music. I loved the sharpshooter. I loved his colors. I loved his look. I loved his hair. I always wanted to be the guy that was going to get the sunglasses, but I was never close enough. I was always in the last row, not the first row. And so that's my 2 cents. I can't say I hate Shawn Michaels, but I respect him. But thank you, Bret. Can we get a little thank you, Bret chant going? Thank you, Bret. Thank you, Bret. Fuck Shawn Michaels.
So, Bret is the champion of Strutting from Gorilla's Battle of the Amazing Wrestlers.
Yeah, and if the listeners feel differently, you can always tweet at us, right, guys? I mean, we'd love to know. I mean, listen, I would love some support on this. So if you can tweet at us, if you like Shawn Michaels, give us your thoughts at @from_gorilla on the Twitter machine. That'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Great episode. We're gonna wrap it up like a I don't know, like a penis. All right, we'll see you.
$46.81 is our stock price. Needed to throw that in at the end.
We now return your perception of reality to you. Until next time.